Welcome to Scary Stories, Real or Written. Here's how this works. Each video contains a few different stories. It might be a real story from my own life, or a true story from a submission, or it might be a completely fictional story that I or someone else wrote. Some stories could even be a sweet blend of both. Your job as the listener is, as you're listening to the story, I want you to try and guess to yourself whether this story is real or written. Once we've reached the end of all the stories, I will go back to each story individually and reveal the answers. Let me know in the comments whether you guessed right or wrong and why you guessed what you did, or whatever your thoughts are. Now, without further ado, please enjoy the following questionable tales. It was the summer after I graduated high school, and my brother and I were staying at our grandparents' house in a small North Carolina coastal town called Newport. My now ex-boyfriend was also there, as he had decided to come visit me for a few days. On one of these days, my brother, my ex, and I decided to go explore for the day. We wanted to go to Fort Macon, a restored Civil War fort near Atlantic Beach, to visit the fort itself and then afterwards go relax on the beach for a while. We pulled into the fort entrance, a long and curvy 2-lane road where you could easily see the fort immediately to the left, and the beach slightly off in the distance to the right. Eventually, we found a parking spot near the main entrance and visitor center of the fort and began wandering around and exploring. If you've never been to Fort Macon, it's a hollowed-out, pentagonal-shaped fortress with multiple doorways lining the inside of the fort, facing out into a mostly empty courtyard, other than a set of stone steps leading up to the grass-covered upper edge, essentially the roof, for lack of a better term, of the fort that you can also walk around on. You can also walk anywhere around the outer base of the fort, and it was within the outer base, somewhere slightly off the typical path, yet hidden in almost plain sight, was where my brother and I noticed an opening that we had never noticed before, despite coming to the fort many times before. Granted, we never wandered quite this far off the typical path either. "I don't remember this being here, do you?" I asked my brother. "I do not," he replied. "But it's definitely had to have been here the whole time, right? I mean, this fort is hundreds of years old, so surely it didn't just pop up overnight," I stated in a mildly bewildered but matter-of-fact tone. "Well, let's check it out," my ex said, making his way to the entrance of the creepy mystery hole. My brother happily took off behind him, but I hung back a bit, feeling incredibly uncertain about the whole situation. Something just felt horribly off. As I watched them descend the stone steps into the dark, my unease continued to intensify. As if the never-before-seen hole itself wasn't weird enough, I began to feel like we were being watched, as if something or someone didn't want us there. "You guys go ahead. I think I'll wait out here. Let me know what's in there, though," I said somewhat nervously. "So far, there's not really much to see except darkness," my brother said. "Are you sure you don't want to come down?" "I'm sure," I replied. "I'm very, very sure." "Oh, come on," said my ex. "Get down here. It's cool. It's just a hole. Oh, and apparently someone left their trash down here." I decided to force myself down about 3/4 of the steps. It was exactly as the guys said. A really dark room with stone walls and a small assortment of trash. An empty soda can or two, an empty chip bag, a ball of paper, and... oh, wait, whoa. I backed up a couple of steps as the image of a man flashed into my mind. He was huge, with a dark, bushy beard, missing an eye, and wearing a military uniform. In the split second I saw him, I was horrified. Meanwhile, the boys had picked up the trash and began ripping it all into smaller pieces, and laughing, scattering the remains about like confetti, and began rifling through their pockets for more. "Guys, stop. You're pissing him off," I screamed, halfway running my brother and my ex over in the process of trying to scramble back up the steps and into the safety of daylight and outside as fast as possible. "Who?" my ex asked, confused and annoyed. "The guy over there in the corner." "Oh shit. Oh shit! He's running at you. Get out. Get out now." They had zero clue what I was going on about, but they finally decided it was urgent enough to exit the dark hole of doom. "What's wrong?" my brother asked, genuinely concerned. "What was all that about?" my ex asked, half curious and halfway irritated. "Give me a minute to think," I said, still shaking with befuddled horror. "Let's just go to the beach. I'm ready to chill and take my mind off whatever that was just now." The guys relented, and we exited the fort and walked over across the parking lot to the beach access. My brother and I were standing in the water, doing our best to carry on about life as if nothing had happened, while my ex hung back to sit on the sand. I looked back at him at one point and noticed he seemed to be having some sort of internal crisis. Worried, I got out of the water and walked over to him. My brother, sensing something amiss, shortly followed. "Hey, you okay?" I asked him. "I think I know what you saw at the fort, and I think he's talking to me now." "Tell me," I asked, intrigued and terrified. My ex then asked, "Did he tell you his name?" I immediately started seeing individual letters written on strips of burned paper in my mind's eye. I said to my ex, "No, but I think he's telling me right now. RANGIZH? I'll be honest, I'm seeing it, but I have no idea how to pronounce it." My ex nodded and said, "Rangish." I said, "It's definitely not an English name. Maybe he was with the Spanish army or something?" And in my head, Rangish confirmed that he was. "Can you tell me what he looks like?" my ex asked. "Big, hairy, and scary. He was a tall, kind of heavy-set guy with a full black beard, wearing a military uniform and missing an eye. Left eye, I think. And he exuded nothing but pure rage. It was awful." My ex continued, "He's telling me that if we don't go back and pick up every single bit of that trash we threw in there, he said he's going to haunt me in my sleep every night until I die." I felt myself stop breathing and my eyes double in size. "I think it's best we just call it a day and go home. What do you guys think?" I asked. The guys agreed, and we got back to the car and drove home. Back at the house, the three of us tried to walk in as casually as possible. But, of course, my grandma, who doesn't miss a trick, sensed something was off. "Is everything okay?" she asked. "You all look stressed." "We're just kind of tired. It was an eventful day, to say the least. Feeling kind of hungry, too," I somewhat but not completely lied. I definitely was tired and hungry, and it was definitely an eventful day. "Well, dinner is ready. We're having spaghetti. Go get cleaned up and come eat," my grandma commanded with a smile. After dinner, the three of us converged upstairs. Do you really think he's gonna haunt you in your sleep? I asked my ex. I hope not, but he probably will. I'm afraid to go to sleep tonight, just thinking about it, my ex replied nervously. I hope not too, but I had a feeling whatever sleep had in store for him tonight, it wasn't going to be sweet dreams and sugar plum fairies. If he does, my brother chimed in, we'll go back over there tomorrow early as possible and clean it up. Either way, I would highly recommend that, I agreed. We spent the rest of the evening watching movies in my brother's room, and eventually all went our separate ways to bed. At some point, in the very early hours of the morning, my ex came into my room and woke me up, almost in tears. What's going on? I asked, only one eye halfway opened. Are you having dreams about rain? Don't even say his name, my ex exclaimed. Yes, I'm having nightmares, and they are horrible. I don't even want to talk about it. We have to go back in the morning, please, as soon as we possibly can. I sat up and told him, we will. We absolutely will. I told you guys not to throw that stuff. Why didn't you listen? Because I'm stupid, he began crying. Stupid, stupid, stupid. I'm sorry. I didn't even reply immediately. I wasn't exactly awake enough to even begin to think of anything to say that would actually be helpful in such a weird circumstance, and I silently agreed. He was pretty stupid, and probably should have listened. But of course, I wasn't going to play I told you so, as clearly upset as he was. Finally, I said, we'll go back. You and my brother can fix it, and it'll be okay. But for now, if we're going to get up early, we need to rest. I know you probably don't want to go back to sleep, but please, at least just rest. He agreed and left and went back to his own room. When we got up the next morning, my ex and I gave my brother a quick briefing on what had happened in the middle of the night, and he agreed we needed to get ready and go. We had a quick breakfast of pancakes and bacon, got our showers, and did what we had to do, and left the house. When we arrived back at the fort, we realized that we didn't exactly take proper note of where Rangish's lair was, so refining it took a good bit. As we were getting to the point of, where the heck could it be? We've looked everywhere there is to look. We saw it again. The guys and I approached the hole, and I felt the annoyed spirit's presence once again. They're back to say they're sorry and clean up their mess, I explained nervously to a spirit I was hoping was listening. The two guys descended back into the hole, and bit by bit began picking up every crumb of litter they could possibly see. I think we got everything, my ex said. Good. Let's get out of here, I exclaimed with relief. We quickly made our way back to the car, ready to leave this literal nightmare behind us. And, sure enough, my ex never once had another nightmare of being haunted by a one-eyed Spanish military man again. When I was younger, at least half the age I am now, my grandfather, who I called Papaw, used to take me and my brother out for boat rides on the intercoastal waterway. Sometimes our boat rides were just for fun, and other times we would ride all the way to one of the lighthouses or the island with the wild horses. But no matter the reason or the destination, we always passed by this one particular island. The island in question was on the smaller side, around 17 acres or so from what I understand. It mainly consisted of shrubbery and a strip of sand on one side during the right tide, but what drew my attention was the single random brick chimney that stood out almost right in the center of the island. Every time we passed by it, I would beg Papaw to pull over, even just for a little bit, and let me explore. And by explore, I mean go crawl all in and around that chimney and try to figure out what purpose, if any, it served. Finally, one fairly warm random day in September, when I was about 16 or 17, Papaw finally relented and surprised me by taking me and my brother to the chimney island. As he pulled the boat up onto the tiny strip of sand, my brother and I could hardly contain our excitement. We told him thank you and hugged him, halfway dragging him out of the boat with us as we tried to express our appreciation and jump out of the boat all in one go. For several minutes, I simply stood there on the sand enjoying the view. The sun shone brightly overhead, casting sparkles of light off the water, with hardly a thing in sight for miles, except for a couple of buoys and a cluster of trees far off in the direction of the house. When the moment was over, I began slowly strolling down the strip of sand, simultaneously looking for shells and, ideally, a small trail where I could cut through some of the almost waist-high shrubbery and make my way over to the main attraction, that glorious chimney. About 5 to 10 minutes of mindless wandering, I did indeed manage finally to spot the skinniest of trails and immediately decided to take off. The trail was barely wide enough to put one foot in front of the other and was lined to the brim with sandburrs. If you don't know what sandburrs are, they're tiny spiky balls that fall off a certain type of beach grass, and they will stick onto anything they accidentally grab onto, and will happily stab you in wherever they so happen to stick. And, despite how slow and careful I was, I ended up with several stabbing my legs and feet. Thankfully, I came up on a clearing where I could pause and take a break and pluck out the sandburrs. As I sat in the sand, plucking and swearing, I thought I heard a creaking sound. Not like an old wooden door creaking, but more mechanical. The sort of sound the Tin Man made after Dorothy and the Scarecrow drenched him in oil and he was able to move again. Only this came from something obviously larger than a rusty elbow. I stood back up and began making my way to the source of the noise, halfway expecting to just find my brother doing something weird, as brothers do. But what I found instead was this massive old gear-looking thing, shifting ever so slightly on its crooked base. I can't explain why, but watching it shift back and forth like that weirded me out a bit, as if it was trying to regain its ability to fully rotate and continue carrying out whatever original purpose it had once served. I decided to not think much harder about it for the moment, though, as the chimney was just a mere 20 or so feet away, and that's what I came for at the end of the day. I walked up to the chimney and touched it, and instantly got a weird vibe, as if suddenly I went from innocent explorer to intruder. As I walked around to the other side of the chimney, I noticed a large circular opening in the brick, and being the curious idiot I was, I crawled inside. There wasn't much to see. Just imagine standing inside of a cylinder made up entirely of red bricks turned halfway black from smoke. As I stood in there, staring around and reveling in the fact that I had finally made it in here, my thoughts were interrupted by someone else's words yelling at me in my head. "You need to leave," it commanded. I jumped and began turning around, trying to figure out what the heck just happened. But I didn't see anything. Until I did. Suddenly, a man stood there, on the other side of the circular-shaped entrance. He was dressed in typical 1930s factory worker fashion. A dark pair of pants with suspenders that went over a light-colored button-up shirt, and a grayish-colored newsboy cap, all of which were blackened in sections by what appeared to be smoke. But it wasn't what he wore that was the issue. It was his face and his exposed forearms. Chunks of flesh were missing in some spots and appeared to be beginning to melt in others. Blisters of various sizes shone in a few areas that weren't otherwise charred to oblivion. I couldn't respond or move for what was probably only about 20 seconds,
but felt like at least 20 minutes, if not an eternity. Finally I asked, "Who are you?" The burned man replied, "Davis. Go away." I then asked him, "What happened here?" "Fire. 1953. Leave now." Davis spoke each word as though they were individual commands. "I will gladly leave if you will let me," I told him. I then watched the man fade away, and the second he was fully gone, I snapped out of my trance, stumbled back through the circular entryway, and made an absolute run for it back down the trail. The sandburrs once again absolutely doing their best to tear my legs to shreds, but I didn't care. I came, I saw more than I needed to, now get me out of here. Thankfully, my brother and Papa were both already in the boat, waiting to go. My brother asked me, "Where have you been?" Papa said they'd been yelling for me for the past 10 minutes. I simply apologized and told them I hadn't heard anything, which is technically true, but I would have heard them had I not been talking to a long-deceased man who died in a factory fire. I never mentioned anything to either of them about this, or anyone else for that matter. Actually, I almost forgot about it until today, and now I wonder if Davis ever left that chimney, or if he's still there, waiting to meet more curious explorers like me. This story happened last year. I decided to take myself, my wife, our 2-year-old daughter, and our chihuahua on what was supposed to be a week-long getaway to an Airbnb on a tiny island off the coast of Maine. It was more than just your standard Airbnb house. It was a lighthouse keeper's cabin that had been completely remodeled, and the original lighthouse, though no longer in operation, stood beside it. We had been carefully planning for this trip for months, knowing that the only way to get on and off the island was by the host picking us up and dropping us off via boat. So we had to ensure we brought enough food, clothes, and any and all potential toddler needs to get us through for an entire week, because once we were dropped off, that's it for the week. No runs to a store, no shopping or fine dining, just our little family together enjoying a true escape from the rest of the world for an entire week. So, believe me when I tell you, the car was packed to beyond the point of what I'm sure wasn't legal for driving. Zero visibility from any of the rear windows, and I felt the car straining for speed the entire 5-hour road trip. It was hell, honestly, but a hell that pales in comparison to the experience that unknowingly lay ahead of us. As we pulled up to the marina, my wife pointed out our host, who was waiting off to the far right in an old 90s era red Chevy truck, with a much newer boat docked in the water directly on the other side of it that looked like a miniature yacht. We parked beside the Chevy and dragged our aching bodies out, stretching and moaning and happy to be free of our overpacked prison on wheels. The host walked over to us and asked, chuckling a bit, "Did you bring enough to get you through the week?" "I sure as hell hope so," I replied. He introduced himself as Charles and told us that he had already gone inside and claimed us a parking pass for the week, so we could be content knowing our car would be fine sitting for the week without getting towed. He even offered to help us unload the car and get everything onto the boat, which we happily accepted. Once the boat was loaded with everything and everyone, we set off. About 15 minutes later, the lighthouse came into view, and my wife and I looked at each other, grinning ear to ear harder than we did when we got married. After months of planning and stressing and the most cramped road trip ever, we had finally arrived. Charles docked the boat and offered to help unload, which again we happily accepted. He helped us bring everything all the way up to the house, and before he left, told us, "Now, If you do somehow run out of food or anything else you need while you're here, let me know and I'll do what I can to get it to you," he offered. We thanked him probably a dozen times and watched him back out from the dock and float away. Ah, alone at last. My wife suggested we take a few minutes to walk around and explore the house, to get a sense of where everything is and decide where to set up our daughter's headquarters, and our own, of course. There were 2 bedrooms and 1 bathroom upstairs, 1 bedroom to the left of the top of the stairs, and 1 to the right, with the bathroom in the middle and positioned directly across from the stairs. The one to the right had a set of twin beds, and so that became toddler base. Thankfully, the other room had a king-size bed. I made cheeseburgers for dinner in the modest little kitchen downstairs, and while we ate, decided we are definitely checking out the lighthouse tomorrow. After dinner, we let our daughter explore and play in the living room while we found a good scary movie to watch on Netflix, until eventually it was time to put her to bed. I carried her upstairs and to her room as my wife followed behind us. We changed her, got her comfy in her pack and play, which we made extra comfy with added foam cushion and blankets to help mimic the comfort of her own crib at home, and gave her hugs and kisses goodnight, and left the room. "She should sleep good tonight after all we've done today," my wife said to me. I told her I sure as heck hope so. I knew I was ready for a good sleep, and the only way I even might get it is if she, the toddler, sleeps. When we went back downstairs to finish our movie and then started another. Eventually, at just before midnight, we decided we'd had enough for one day and did our best to quietly sneak up the creaky stairs to bed, hoping not to disturb the small child. Mission accomplished. So far, not a peep from her tonight. Thank goodness. Me, my wife, and our pup all piled into the king-size bed, turned off the lights, and did our best to try and sleep, but due to all the hype of the day, it took a while to calm our brains. It was probably just a bit before 1 a.m. when I felt myself about to slip off the edge of consciousness and into a wonderful, blissful sleep, when suddenly the toddler started screaming. Not whining, not the usual wake up in the middle of the night crying, full-blown, tormented screaming that immediately launched me out of the bed upon hearing it. I took off toward her room, and my wife dragged herself as steadily as she could behind me, with her eyes half open. I flipped on the light to my daughter's room and saw that she was huddled in a ball in the middle of the pack-and-play, scream-crying and shaking harder than I would have thought her tiny body was even capable of. My wife rushed over and plucked her out of the pack-and-play, trying to give her hugs while my daughter continued to scream and cry and kick, and in the midst of her screaming kept saying, "Oh no, oh no, oh no, oh no, oh no." "It's okay, I got you, little baby," my wife said in a half-yelling, half-soothing voice, just trying to be heard over the tremendous screaming. "Mommy!" she croaked through her tears, the blood-curdling screams and thrashing finally beginning to die down a bit. I said to my wife, "Well, no sleep for us tonight, I guess." To which she replied, "Probably not, but maybe we can try putting her in bed with us." Hey, whatever works. We've never let her sleep with us before, but anything is worth a shot over listening to all of that all night. And so there we were, 2 overtired adults, a toddler coming down from a panic attack, and a small, concerned dog, all piled together in an, again thankfully, king-size bed. My daughter had calmed down drastically after about 20 minutes of cuddling and soothing, and so I went to turn off the lights so we could hopefully all sleep. Oh no, heaven forbid. The second it went dark, she started screaming again about a scary boy, followed by more oh no's. Sighing in defeat, I flipped the light back on and just crawled in bed, Eventually, by almost 4 a.m., she finally fell asleep, and so did the rest of us. We woke up late the next morning, about 10 a.m. Everyone ate breakfast and got ready, and we decided it was time to wander over to that lighthouse for a bit. "Do you want to see the lighthouse?" my wife asked our daughter, who happily parroted, "Lighthouse!" and took off running towards it, and so we took off after her. The lighthouse was nothing short of impressive. It towered over the keeper's cabin by at least 100 feet. I could see where decades of weather had worn away at the paint and spots to reveal the red brick hidden underneath. A short and skinny door was built into one side, and I had to duck and step in halfway sideways to get inside. But it was well worth it. Inside, a spiral staircase wound its way all the way up to the very top where the lantern room was. My wife immediately wanted to climb it, but I declined and offered to stay at the bottom with the toddler and the pup. Between the two of them, those stairs were a death trap waiting to happen. But I told her if she wanted to go up, go ahead, and maybe we can switch out when she's done. I watched her ascend until I could see her no more, and realized I very badly wanted to see what she was seeing right now. About 10 to 15 minutes later, I saw her start to carefully climb back down, and she was already telling me how beautiful it was. The way the sunlight reflected on the different facets of the lens, the view of the house and the ocean. I'm very ready to take my turn, to say the least. Soon as her foot hit the last step, I began making my way up and up and up. And wow, she was right. I did my own 10 to 15 minutes of marveling and eventually crawled back down. We went back to the house to relax and have some lunch, and my wife showed me some of the pictures she had taken at the top of the lighthouse. A view of the house, another pointed straight at the ground that really demonstrated the height, another one of the ocean, but it was the last one she showed me that struck me as odd. "What is that? Wait, who is that?" I asked her. "Huh?" "Scroll back to that picture with the lighthouse lens," I told her. She did, and I pointed out what looked like an old man in the reflection of one of the lens facets. "I have no idea," she said. "Did you notice any, portraits up there or anything? Something that could have reflected weirdly, maybe?" she offered. I told her no, there was absolutely nothing up there but a giant light reflecting crystalline bulb, and she admitted she didn't remember seeing anything either. We brushed it off for now and resumed the day as normal. It was a great day, even though the most exciting thing we did was walk over to the lighthouse. Finally, it was bedtime again, and once again, everyone piled into the king bed. We all fell asleep more peacefully this time than we did the night before, for sure. Well, for a couple of hours at least. And then I woke up to the smell of smoke. I sat straight up in bed, just sniffing for several seconds, trying to determine what kind of burning smell it was. Finally, I came to the conclusion of burning wood. Did we leave the fireplace going? I got up and hauled myself downstairs to check. Not the fireplace. I walked room to room, looking and sniffing. The burning smell was weaker in some areas and stronger in others, but the strongest smell came from a random, completely empty area between the living room and the kitchen. Confused, but no longer alarmed, I surrendered my search and went back to bed, only to find my wife awake and sitting up. "Did you smell that burning smell?" "I think it's gone now, but any idea what it was?" she asked me, and I explained to her that's actually why I was up and wandering around, but no, I didn't find anything. We managed to go back to sleep and slept through the night with no more disruptions aside from being kicked in the ribs by my daughter a few times, and the pup crawling back and forth over the top of us trying to avoid also being kicked. When we got up and went downstairs the next morning, I immediately noticed something strange. A burn mark on the floor in the same area I smelled the strongest burning smell last night. I asked my wife if she had any ideas, thoughts, or theories, and she only said she didn't know what did it. She just hopes they better not be expecting us to replace it. We slid a rug from the living room over the top of it and basically completely forgot about it, spending most of the day outside on the porch and just watching the waves roll by, while my daughter chased the dog around the yard. As nice as the day was, I found myself sitting there, hoping and praying to any God who would listen that maybe tonight we could all get some real sleep. The last 2 nights haven't been the best by a long shot. As we all piled in the bed together for the 3rd night in a row, I hoped for the best and prepared for the worst. And oh boy, it was a good thing I tried to prepare, but even still, I was not prepared for this particular brand of worst. I slept great until about 3 a.m. when I woke up needing to pee immediately. I quickly made my way into the bathroom to the toilet and, upon finishing my business, turned in the direction of the mirror and immediately regretted my decision. Reflected in the mirror, standing back at me with the burning hatred of 1,000 suns, was a man. An older man, wearing a 3-piece wool suit, complete with a long-waisted jacket and navy cap, with a face so scarred from flames that I could barely distinguish individual facial features except for his eyes. His pitch-black, hollow eyes, surrounded by wrinkles and scars. Immediately wide awake, I tore out of the bathroom and into the bedroom, practically launching myself onto my wife to wake her up. "What?" she grumbled with one eye cracked open, obviously irritated at being jarred awake by God only knows what for the 3rd night in a row. "I saw a man," I began explaining. "You saw a man?" she repeated, beginning to wake up a bit more. I began describing what just happened, and by the time I was done, my wife looked ready to jump out of the bed, toddler and dog in hand, and make a break for it. "We need to leave," she said. I reminded her we can't leave unless we can get Charles to pick us up. And since it's 3:30 a.m., the odds of that happening are extremely unlikely. But we both agreed that first thing in the morning, assuming we survive the night, we'll give him a call. I'm pleased to say we survived the night, but I don't think either of us slept for a second. Basically, we laid there awake, just watching and listening for anything out of the ordinary. As soon as the clock hit 7 a.m., we rolled out of bed to get ready and throw all our things together as fast as possible, and by 8 a.m., I was ready to call the host. All I told him was that we had a family-related emergency back home and, if possible, really needed to leave as soon as we could. He said he would be there in about another hour. While we sat in the living room, waiting, I noticed my wife on her phone, with a look of intrigue and then surprise, followed by her saying, "Hey, so guess what I just discovered?" She showed me on her phone a picture and an article of an old lighthouse keeper standing outside of the original cabin and the lighthouse right on the other side of the window we sat beside. The article went on to talk about how, back in 1918, the lighthouse keeper had gone mad from isolation and the general harsh conditions of the island and his job, and decided to set fire to the cabin with himself inside of it. If I wasn't ready to leave before then, I was more than ready now. Charles showed up about 20 minutes after that, and as he helped us load, offered a partial refund for our stay, which I happily accepted, as the bill for staying at a real lighthouse didn't come cheaply. As we pulled off from the dock, I thought I saw a face watching us leave from the upstairs bedroom window, And I thought to myself, I hope he finds his peace. Well, there's the end of our stories for the day. Do you have your guesses for each one in mind? Let's go over them one by one now. Our first story was The One-Eyed Soldier, where the girl and her ex and her brother went to that old military fort and the guys disrespected the angry spirit of a soldier, despite the girl heavily warning them against it. That was a wild one, wasn't it? No way that was real, right? Wrong. That story was 100% real. Every word and action, down to the most minor details. And it's a story from my own life. If you have any additional questions, comment and I will do my best to answer. Let's move on to our second story, The Burned Man. The one where the grandfather takes the narrator and their brother to the island with the chimney and is told to leave by a guy who burned to death along with the factory. That story was partly real and partly written, and it is also loosely based on my own life experience. My grandfather taking us on boat rides past an actual island with a random chimney is real, and though we really did beg him to take us over there, he never did. So, based on some research I compiled about the island, I made my own story. See, there used to be a Menhaden processing factory on that island, and when it burned down in 1953, nothing was left but the chimney and that giant gear-looking thing I mentioned. Now, as for Davis, a man with the last name of Davis did die on the island while it was a Menhaden processing factory, but he did not die in the fire. He died well before the fire happened by falling off some scaffolding and then later passed away due to his injuries. So lastly, let me explain our third and final story, Dark Side of the Lighthouse. A family staying at a real lighthouse and lighthouse keeper's cabin that was reconfigured to be an Airbnb leaves their stay early after only 3 nights after strange things happen, which ends with the spirit of the lighthouse keeper himself appearing in the reflection of the bathroom mirror. Sounds believable enough, right? Well, this story is 100% completely written fiction. I wrote it myself, and the only real-life references I used were a few pictures from different lighthouses and cabins that you can stay in to help me lay out descriptive written visuals. The family in the story is based on my own little family, mainly because character convenience mainly, but to add extra interest, I decided to tell it from my husband's perspective instead of my own. But anyway, no, we never stayed in a lighthouse. We've never been to Maine, and it definitely would be more than a 5-hour road trip to get there. I'm the only one in this house who's even been close to a lighthouse. Now, just because this particular story is fake, doesn't mean something similar hasn't actually happened to someone else. It just means that this particular story in this particular episode is entirely made up. So, did you guess any of the stories right today? If you did, I'm proud of you, and I hope you will subscribe to the channel so that every week you can have fun guessing more brand new but questionable stories. If you want to submit a story of your own, regardless of how real or written it may be, go to the description and look for the link, and from there you can fill out the Google form and send it in. I look forward to hearing from you whenever you're ready, and I hope you look forward to hearing from me again next week.